Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date and help the channel grow. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And now, on with the show. You are listening to the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion with the one and only Gray. Greetings, opinion nerds. It is I, the one they call Gray, and I'd like to share with you my experience when watching writer-director Kogonada's After Yang in the Gray Area coming up right now. So, this is what happened to me during After Yang, opinion nerds. This is not about a movie. Okay, clearly there's a movie involved, and a pretty damn interesting one at that. But this isn't about the movie itself, who made it, how it was made, what it was about. Okay, clearly there will be some of that in here, but I reiterate, this is not about a movie. This is about the experience of watching a movie. Specifically, this is about my experience watching a movie. There are many like it, but this one is mine. As of this publishing, the Criterion Channel is featuring a collection of films loosely revolving around the idea of AI, or artificial intelligence. Actually, one of the films in the collection is the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence, director Steven Spielberg's attempts to fulfill the last vision of director Stanley Kubrick following his death in 1999. Along with that, there are movies like John Carpenter's Dark Star, John Boorman's Zardoz. Yes, the one with Sean Connery in a red diaper. It's surprisingly more complex than you might have suspected. The Keanu Reeves starring Johnny Mnemonic in both color and black and white, and a handful of other odds and ends, shorts, and even a Bjork music video where she's all CG'd up like an android, or maybe she's just cheekily revealing herself to be the interdimensional synthezoid we always suspected she was. Along with curiosities like 1977's Demon Seed, 1987's Making Mr. Right, and 2004's 2046, you'll find After Yang, the 2021 film based on the short story Saying Goodbye to Yang by Alexander Weinstein, written and directed by South Korean filmmaker Kogonada. Placed among the very cheap sci-fi, near-farcical comedies and animated actioners, 1995's Ghost in the Shell is included, After Yang hits like a sudden energy vacuum if you're watching multiple entries in a row. It's a quiet and quite serene film set in the not-so-far-off future where androids and clones are staples of everyday life. After the unexpected and unrecoverable failure of Yang, the second-hand android they purchased to help their adopted daughter learn about her Chinese heritage, parents Jake, played by Colin Farrell, and Kira, played by Jodie Turner-Smith, come to grips with how out of touch with their lives they've become as they learn from the android's unusual collection of memories the importance of what they've been missing. There's a lot to draw from the film as Jake unravels Yang's mysterious life, what makes a person family, the value of being present, how we navigate the sudden loss of a loved one, realizing how we affect and are affected by the lives we touch. It's a piece of science fiction in the classic mold, as something that exists outside the human experience helps us better understand the value of that experience. But like I said, this isn't about the movie. I'm not always the best audience at home. I talk a lot of shit about how to properly watch movies when out and about, but I'm just like anyone else. I have my phone, my tablet, my laptop, and all manner of distractions and diversions within arm's reach at any given time. Even when I go out of my way to specifically put on something I know I have to invest my attention in, I tend to meander from one thing to another. I half watch, half listen while I touch, type, and swipe in a directionless search for something to occupy my fidgety brain while trying to absorb the film from the embers it leaves behind as it passes through the air around me. I don't always come equipped for the most challenging intellectual experiences on a random Thursday night, so despite how my constantly expanding wish list of films seems to drift further and further out of reach, between not wanting to alienate my long-suffering spouse and my general lack of available brain smarts, I'll often gravitate towards films I'm either already familiar with or ones that present themselves as being relatively low impact. I'll admit, I was attracted to the film for shallow reasons, like people who've read Infinite Jest. No one actually likes Infinite Jest, they just like being able to say they've read it. I didn't expect much from the film in terms of takeaway, and to be fair, if you think the movie is going to pull a Yui and the characters are somehow going to come out worse in the end, you're delusional, and I'd like some, please and thank you. I figured the film was going to be one of those ponderous existential journeys more than a work of speculative fiction where the relationship between human and machine brews questions about the nature of humanity, and to be honest, I wasn't all wrong. But as we often discuss, the experience of a film is not the story it's telling, but how that story is being told. So there I was with phone and laptop in hand for about the first 20 minutes or so. I was content to let the film play in the background, half watched and half observed, the experience just wafting in the air around me. Initially, I thought it was the mounting mystery about the hidden memory chip found inside the android's core that finally managed to get my full attention, but that's not really accurate. Sure, I know at what point I finally closed the laptop and put the phone down, but the film had already been tickling at my attention with its presentation as I began to find the sucking vacuum of quiet family turmoil more engaging than watching people scream at each other in an overt attempt to manipulate audience emotions with manufactured dramatics. The mystery of Yang is certainly the thread that binds all the elements of the film together, but getting to the answers is only important for how it affects the characters, mainly in terms of where it leads them in their contemplations. See, the film never asks a question about whether Yang is alive or whether or not he should be considered human. Not directly, anyway. Those are questions that can be asked and are approached abstractly as characters talk about Yang, but getting answers to those questions doesn't illuminate anything for the audience because whether or not Yang can be considered alive or human isn't the point. It's not what the film wants to explore. Yang is a character in the film, don't get me wrong. His presence matters beyond the fact of his existence. That is part of the film's message. But the facts of Yang's past and his ultimate fate aren't really important. Yang is important to the film because the situation his death births gives the characters a reason or excuse to ask questions about themselves and about their lives. He's not dissimilar from the character of Alex in The Big Chill, whose death brings a group of people together, but who, for the sake of the story being told, doesn't really matter. Of course I was interested in the plot about Yang, where he came from, where he'd been, and how he ended up with his family. I was even interested in whether or not there was a reason for his unexpected shutdown, what the film ominously refers to as an interior core problem. I'm an addict for tight plotting and structure, so watching a film go through its paces in a manner both logical and entertaining is a real dopamine hit for me. But even though the movie pulled me in with the mystery, I quickly began to find that it was the larger questions that were occupying my interest. Unfortunately, I also realized that I wasn't really emotionally engaged with what was going on. The film is a relatively realistic emotional portrayal, but usually in the light of that, there are other techniques of filmmaking that will make up the emotional ground, and I didn't feel that happening. I can appreciate why so much about what Yang was actually capable of experiencing, if it was real in the sense that we understand it or if it was all just programming, is kept vague. But without a sense that Yang was struggling with himself, and because it doesn't seem like the family is divided on the issue of Yang being a machine, no matter how complex, I didn't make a connection to the character's experiences. To me, Yang became a thing to motivate the plot, something to be talked about in his role as gateway to everything else. I didn't feel as if the film was working in emotional peaks and valleys. It was pretty emotionally even, pleasantly so, but even nonetheless. The impression I was left with was of a film that was beautiful but sterile, warm but distant. The lack of a greater sense of the future world kept it from being a totally immersive reality, which led to an artifice that seemed almost amateurish, for lack of a better word. It's a good-looking movie, but there really isn't much of anything interesting in it to look at unless you believe everyone will be wearing baggy kimonos 60 years from now. I don't know if spending the time and money on sci-fi vistas and sets and props to show off some futurist design portfolio would have earned enough return on investment to make it worth it, even if I think it would have made for a stronger film. If this had been an animated film, a really detailed animated film that didn't take any shortcuts, it may have mitigated some of these issues. Once the film had me, I'd never turn my attention away, but that doesn't mean I felt engaged the entire time. And when it was done, I felt satisfied with my viewings, but not particularly radicalized by its questions. Where I finally landed was in the space between appreciation and enjoyment, and mostly feeling oddly pleased that someone actually made a science fiction film of this caliber in 2021. I feel a draw towards watching it again, but it's more of an intellectual curiosity than a desire to re-engage with the experience. I'll check to see if I missed anything in the plot or what interesting threads I can find woven through the screenplay, but for the most part, I don't know if the film really has anything more to offer me. However, I'm more than willing to admit that I'm not really that smart or really that observant. I'm not really the best person to be doing this. See, I've seen and read good film critique, and boy howdy, I can tell you, if you came here looking for that kind of meal, you rocked up to the wrong fucking taco truck. I can only come to a piece of material from the place that I have available to me, so I miss a lot of subtext and nuance and stuff like that. I tend to focus on making sure I put all the points of the plot together with the storytelling, and that I feel I have a grasp on the primary experience before I can even think about going any deeper. It takes me multiple viewings to catch things that I am sure jump right out of the screen and curl up all snugly like in the laps of others. So I have to ask if my lack of engagement is representative of a lack of interest, or if the real meat of the film simply got by me and I didn't connect with it because I didn't get it. I don't think that's true, but I am unimaginably insecure about these things. There's a very brief moment after a film ends that a person feels as if they have to suddenly sum up their reaction to it, as if how you go on to think about the film for any given period of time is going to depend on what manages to clip the barbed wire encampment of your internal emotional filters and tunnel its way out of your mouth to freedom. Once I hit the touch key to stop the stream and raised myself from the nestle of my wife's lap, I looked into her eyes and said, "That was all right." That was all right? Fuck me. Right, maybe the movie wasn't the most profound intellectual or emotional experience I've ever had, but it's very well considered and directed. It's a smart film, one that might not hit the heights of emotion, but understands itself and what it wants to say. It's as unafraid to ask some pretty big questions as it is unembarrassed that those questions are kind of 101 level contemplations of life and the universe. Still, that was all right? Jesus Christ. Look, not all stories end with a rousing epiphany. My immediate response may not have been the most galaxy-brained, but ultimately, it is an honest one. The movie was all right. It didn't take me on a trip through my own soul, show me wondrous things I could never have imagined, or put me on a thrilling roller coaster ride of action and suspense. It's far from being a bad movie in any respect, but it's not something I felt the need to run out and sing the praises of. It was all right. It was pretty good. And considering that the spectrum of film quality does actually span from mind-blowing, life-changing experience to holy shit, that was fucking awful, just being all right is no kind of insult. When you watch a movie, you're living two competing experiences. There's the experience the movie is trying to create, and then there's the experience you're actually having. As a person who tries to communicate films to other people, I make an effort to understand the former, but as a human being desperately clinging to this great hurtling rock we all call home, I'm ultimately defined by the latter. After Yang is a very well-made movie, and if I had taken it in a different setting, if I had gone to the theater to see it, my sense of investment and my response may have been different, and I bear sole responsibility for that. That the movie was strong enough to eventually overtake my attempts to more or less ignore it, whether I intended to or not, speaks volumes to me about its value. But like I said at the start, this isn't about a movie. This is about an experience. My experience, and I'd have to say it was a good one. I certainly don't regret it. And it's entirely possible this is an experience I'll come to regard as special. I don't feel like I've ever had a religious or even a particularly profound experience with a film the way others say they have. I'm certainly wary of being one of those people who talks about how every experience is meaningful and should be cherished. Tell that to my last trip through the Target checkout. But while each experience may not be unique, they are uniquely yours, and that's meaningful in some way. Movies don't matter. Movies aren't meaningful, at least not of themselves. It's the experiences we have with movies that gives them meaning and makes them matter. So, if I may offer a suggestion, The next time you finish a movie, take a little while to make a note of the experience you had and what that experience means to you. And maybe wait a little bit before you speak, just in case you say something stupid. This has been the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion. As always, I have been Gray, and if you like what you heard, you can leave a tip at our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/notthepopular-opinion. You can follow us on Twitter at @only_Gray, and don't forget our main page at notthepopularopinion.wordpress.com, where you'll find more great articles just like this. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're as good to others as you are to yourself, we might just make it through this mess. See ya.